The 2022 Atlantic hurricane season has been relatively inactive, contrary to many predictions by the National Hurricane Center and other official agencies. However, if Hurricane Andrew taught us anything, it was this: it only takes one. On September 23rd, a tropical depression, like many before and after it, developed. What was different about this one was that it would become one of, if not the worst natural disaster Florida faced. This Category 4 or 5 monster tore through Fort Meyers and Sanibel Island, as well as destroyed much of the Port Charlotte area, resulting in at least 130 deaths across the United States, the vast majority in Florida. The damage is unknown. Needless to say, this hurricane will go down in history as another I-named storm that developed and devastated parts of Florida, Cuba, and South Carolina. And to make things even more confusing, there is a debate on whether this is a Category 4 or 5 at landfall. But either way, the result is still the same. This hurricane is Hurricane Ian, Florida's worst nightmare. I am Pat from Pat's Path Predictor, and welcome to today's documentary. The monster that was Ian would be tracked by the NHC on September 19, 2022, after several European model runs indicated that it would develop. Initial development was slow due to the outflow from Hurricane Fiona, or to be more specific, the wind shear accompanying this outflow. However, by September 23rd, it was able to organize and became a tropical depression at 5 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. This depression was slow to start, becoming Tropical Storm Ian 18 hours later, but this system was disheveled and somewhat recovering from the wind shear. However, as Ian moved into an area of weaker wind shear, it began to gradually strengthen on September 24th, reaching 50 miles per hour at 11 p.m. By this point, however, Cuba, Florida, and the Cayman Islands were taking this very seriously, issuing hurricane warnings for the first two, and a state of emergency was declared in Florida on September 24th. Ian weakened slightly, but after trading strength for organization, it began to rapidly intensify, something that myself and my friend Ethan WX went over during our interview.
There's a very real chance that it gets into those waters and it does this, and it, pulls a rapid intensification cycle, similar to what we saw with Gustav in 2008, where it becomes a high-end Category 4 in, only a few hours, just because of that extremely good shear conditions and very deep ocean heat content.
Right.
Very warm waters for a pretty large area. And, with that landfall in Cuba, that region is not very mountainous. It's pretty flat. It's a lot of farmland, and it's not very wide either.
Yeah.
So
it might spend a couple of hours in Cuba, and it'll be more of a net positive, it seems.
Yeah, and it's not moving very slowly like Irma was. Irma kind of sat over Cuba for like 2 days, and that kind of eroded the southern half of the eye wall. Whereas this storm is going to go straight through in a few hours and not really be affected as much by the land. It'll probably only knock it down 10 miles per hour.
Right. Ian would go from a 45 mile per hour tropical storm to a 100 mile per hour Category 2 hurricane in 24 hours, with Ian reaching hurricane strength at 5 a.m. on September 26th. Ian was now approaching western Cuba, where the low-lying farmland in the region would historically not do much to weaken a tropical system. A perfect example of this was Hurricane Ida in 2021 or Hurricane Gustav in 2008. Ian would continue to intensify more, reaching Category 3 major hurricane status on September 27th at 2:30 a.m. 2 hours later, Ian made landfall near Pinar del Rio, Cuba, with winds of 125 miles per hour and a pressure of 952 millibars. The satellite imagery and radar showed that land interaction in Cuba did absolutely nothing to the structure of the storm. If anything, it only expanded the wind field and made it more pronounced. Ian did weaken slightly, however, to a 115 mile per hour hurricane, but that was little deterrent for what was to come. Ian strengthened to 120 miles per hour before undergoing an eyeball replacement cycle. This ERC, surprisingly, was barely noticeable on satellite, but on radar, it showed the eye getting bigger and an inner eyeball dissipating. Normally, the ERCs weaken hurricanes, but in this instance, it only further enlarged the wind field. The pressure kept dropping throughout the day on September 27th, as it was approaching southwest Florida. Before this, it was expected to make landfall at Tampa Bay as a Category 2 hurricane due to the wind shear weakening storm. However, Ian's direction took a turn towards southwest Florida, to the Port Charlotte area to be exact, where Hurricane Charlie made landfall in 2004. At this point, Ian was expected to strengthen maybe a little bit before landfall in Florida, potentially to a 130 mile per hour Category 4 hurricane, but we weren't even sure if that was going to happen. However, the ERC completed late into the night on September 27th, and it would begin to explosively intensify. Ian had already hit the Florida Keys, with the eye passing over dry Tortugas, and caused a large storm surge for the Keys. After this, Key West radar and hurricane hunters saw something very alarming. Ian was now a Category 4 hurricane with winds of 140 miles per hour as of 5 a.m. September 28th. The strengthening did not stop there, reaching a peak official intensity of 155 miles per hour 3 hours later. However, there is debate on this. Flight level winds of 165 knots and SFMR data of 160 mile per hour winds at the surface was observed. And to further confirm this, a dropsend of 137 knots, or 157.5 miles per hour, showing that Ian was likely a Category 5 hurricane. Either way, the result would be the same. A catastrophic landfall in Florida was coming. It was too late to evacuate for many people in the Port Charlotte area, as just 30 hours before, they were on the outer edges of the cone. And to add salt to the wound, it seemed that the western eyeball was the strongest eyeball, meaning that after it would get hit with the eye, the second eyeball would be more catastrophic than the first. Ian was at its peak intensity and ready to bear down on Florida. Dry air finally wrapped around the hurricane, and the wind shear began to slowly affect it. But by this point, tragically, it was too late. On September 28th, 2022, at 3:05 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, Ian made landfall near Cayo Costa, Florida, with winds of 150 miles per hour and a pressure of 940 millibars. Sanibel Island, which had cameras watching the storm surge overtake the island, was devastated, with the only bridge to the island destroyed, making it from bad to worse. At 4:35 p.m., Ian made another landfall just south of Punta Gorda, Florida, with winds of 145 miles per hour. Ian would devastate the area, with Fort Meyers completely obliterated and part of Naples being completely underwater. In Cape Coral, a gust of 140 miles per hour was reported, which is officially the highest wind recorded. However, several storm chasers recorded winds much higher than that, with Jock Williams reporting a sustained wind of 159 miles per hour and a gust of 187 from the western eyewall as it came ashore. Up to 18 feet of storm surge crashed onto Florida's coast, with it going deep inland due to the Port Charlotte area being so low in elevation. Ian was without a doubt 10 times worse than Charlie, both due to the size of Ian compared to Charlie and the storm surge Ian produced. Ian weakened over land due to land interaction, weakening down below hurricane status by 4 a.m. September 29th. However, as Lake Okeechobee and much of Florida suffered extreme floods, which would wreak havoc across the state, Ian reemerged over water 12 hours later. Almost immediately, Ian began re-strengthening. However, its appearance was disheveled and sheared, a complete contrast to what it was 24 hours ago. However, this did not stop Ian, regaining hurricane status at 5 p.m. Ian's wind field was massive, with tropical storm force winds extending out nearly 500 miles from the center. No one was safe from Ian in South Carolina, where Ian was headed. The next day, on September 30th, 2022, at 2:15 p.m., Ian made its final landfall near Georgetown, South Carolina. Coincidentally, kind of close to where Charlie made landfall in 2004. After this, Ian became extratropical and moved slowly through North Carolina, bringing heavy rain in the region. Finally, on October 2nd, 2022, Ian dissipated over southern Virginia. However, the story is not over yet, as the remnants of Ian reformed into a nor'easter and brought considerable rain to New Jersey, New York, and New England. It lingered for several days before exiting the United States on October 7th, leaving behind a path of absolute destruction from Cuba to South Carolina. Due to this being recent and the fact that not all the damage has been surveyed, we will not go in depth with the damage in each area in this documentary. There will be a part 2 released sometime in the next month talking about the damage Ian left behind. In the meantime, I want to end this discussing something real quickly. The Hurricane Hugo, Hurricane Maria, and Hurricane Mitch documentaries promised were not released. The reason was because I was focused on covering Hurricanes Fiona and Ian, as they were both dangerous storms that I need to pay full attention to, as these were life-threatening events. I am now returning to weekly documentaries, so I'll get those out as soon as I can. In the meantime, please be patient, and I'll give you those documentaries that you guys love so much. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed. Stay safe.